Alrighty, good morning. It's been basically a year since I did my last update for my rack here. There's been some changes, and some not changes, so I figured it was time to do a quick update video before I get into my next set of major upgrades coming next year, and I'll touch on those at the end. So open up here, and the first thing to note, the rack has been turned by 90 degrees. So this came about because we got a new water heater and I needed to get the rack out of the way, but also because I was kind of lacking space in that area to add and remove servers. And after turning it, I found it just worked a lot better in this orientation, so I'm definitely going to keep it this way. The air conditioner is still the same as it was, and it is a little bit messy in here, again, for the same reason that the rack was turned. We had to kind of make room to do the water heater, and then I've just sort of stacked junk back in here. But it is what it is. So I'll go over the front of the server here. It's a little hard to get a good angle here, but hopefully this does the job for you. So one of the first things, up at the top, I removed the ventilation fan out of the top because now it's just open to the side, and I kind of have a ventilation fan intake for the air conditioner there, just sitting at the side of the rack now, and it does quite a good job. So that's done. The patch panel and switches, still the same. So I have my 1 gig patches up at the top, then I have my 1 gig switch, which is a Quanta LB4M, and then below that I have my 10 gig switch, which is a Quanta LB6M. The network connections, they're all color-coded. So the orange is my WAN connections, the green is my wireless access points, the blue is my links out to my desk and client networks, yellow is management, and the first set of whites is my connection up to my routers, and the second set of whites is the connection to my testing hypervisor cluster, which I'll show later on. The 10 gig is all, those black DAC cables, and there's 2 links to each server in LACP, so I get plenty of bandwidth. Below that are my routers, again, unchanged. So those are 2 mini PC systems. I forget the exact brand, but they're running Debian on them, and then have a VM on top of each one that's running FreeBSD for all my routing. So if you watch my previous video about how my network works, you'll see the details of my crazy WAN setup, and these routers enable that with full FreeBSD, no pfSense or OpenSense shenanigans in here. Below that, we have my Ceph cluster, which has a couple minor changes despite being the same chassis from the last video. So they're Dell PowerEdge R720XDs that I got last year, and they're working great. The modifications, the first one is that I took one of the CPUs out of each one of them because I didn't need it, and it was just sucking back power. So I did that. So I've only got a single, I think it's a 16-core CPU in them. I'm not going to actually go into these specific specs here. I have those listed on my website. If you want to look, I have a section on my website now called My Hardware, which lists the specific specs of all these servers. But in them, I did add 2 more 14 terabyte drives thanks to my bonus last year. So that brought the total up to 3 14 terabyte drives and 6 8 terabyte drives in each of the Ceph nodes. So that gives me a total of like 240-ish gigs, something like that, 256 gigs, somewhere around there of usable space, or of raw space. Usable is about half that. So I have plenty of storage space at this point. I'm not hurting, and I have no plans to really add any more hard drives anytime soon. But, yeah, the temptation always exists. If I go down a bit further, the white box backup server is also still the same as it was. So this is, but it does have a significant upgrade inside of it. So what this is, it's taking backups of the Ceph and the hypervisors and all the VMs onto 4 8 terabyte drives in a RAID 5 or ZFS RAID Z. But the major upgrade, because I'll touch on later another replacement, so this now has a Haswell era 16-core CPU and a whole bunch of RAM in it, because I had that system free to my former base. So it's a massively overkill, overspec backup server, but, I wanted to replace the old one with a new one, hardware-wise, specifically to get USB 3, so I could plug in a USB 3 hard drive, and it's massive overkill. It really is, but, it's there, it runs, it does its thing. And now we're getting into the real major meat and potatoes upgrades over the last year. So the first are 3 Dell PowerEdge R630s. So I actually got 4 of them, and I'll touch on the 4th in a second, that were generously donated to me by an anonymous donor. So this has been a major upgrade to my network. These guys allow me to basically double the CPU and RAM resources that I had in my primary hypervisor cluster, which has been invaluable for testing some more extreme cases with my PVC hypervisor system. So I'm able to actually allocate VMs of enormous size, like 256 gigs, just to test how those work in terms of migration and all of that, and it's helped a lot. Other than, you know, doubling the CPU and quadrupling the RAM that was in them, they have the same disk still, so 200 gig S3700 system disks and 800 gig S3700 data disks. That's still the same, but the Power Edge upgrade has been very nice. Below that is the 4th Power Edge. So I replaced my 4U white box base, you know, desktop in a cloud system with one of these Power Edges, because I got 4 of them. And it's been quite a nice change. It took a little finagling when I first did it, because I had to figure out some solutions. You know, I was using an NVIDIA 1660 as my GPU, so I had to end up getting some Tesla T4s. But they are a major upgrade. I've got 2 of them in here. One is passed through to a VM to do gaming, which I don't do very often, but, you know, it's there when I want it. And the other one is doing machine learning type stuff, mostly text or speech to text with faster whisper. So that's been working very well. I've also been testing some other machine learning stuff on it. Nothing too exciting. I'm not really an AI enthusiast, let's say. I don't really care about it that much. But it's been cool to have that voice transcription for my home automation stuff. Trying to think if there's anything else useful in there that's interesting. Oh yes, it's got another upgrade. It's got 2 2TB NVMe drives in a ZFS RAID 1 as the system disk. So when I, you know, replaced the old base with the new base, I reinstalled it from scratch using a ZFS root on Debian, which works quite well. Just throwing that out there. If anyone's been thinking about doing a ZFS root on Debian, it works quite well. With Debian 11, which is what that's running. I haven't upgraded to Debian 12 yet, due to some weird incompatibilities with, believe it or not, NVIDIA's driver. Who would have guessed it? Then below that, finally, I didn't get rid of the R430s that I originally used for my production cluster. Those are now my testing cluster. So one of the benefits of that I found really invaluable is having, you know, hardware parity roughly between my testing and production clusters, at least in terms of things like CPU generation, physical chassis, hardware, IPMI, all of that. I'm no longer having to deal with the absolute crap that is HP's iDRAC or ILO. I have iDRAC 8 on all of these, which works very well. And they're very low spec machines. They have like a 6-core CPU and 12 gigs of RAM in them. It's just enough to run a few testing VMs, but that's what I need when I'm doing development. So I use the testing cluster to do actual development on PVC. You know, I can keep reinstalling and reinstalling, you know, changes as I make them and make sure they actually work. And then I deploy it to my production one to make sure it's valid and everything's working the way I expect before I release a version. And then I release it publicly and upgrade my customer systems at work. Lastly, at the bottom, underneath those 3 testing ones, is a 4th R430, because one of the old ones that I had died on me, actually, just before Christmas. So over the Christmas holidays, I was waiting very nervously for replacement, both a replacement server that I ended up going and finding one locally and just picking it up, and then a motherboard that actually came about 2 weeks before I expected it to. So I have a spare now. I replaced the one that had died, and now I have a spare, plus a spare motherboard. It works quite well. And below that, a bunch of junky HP servers that are really just there as fodder to, you know, keep them somewhere. And then finally, my 2 APC 2200 volt amp XL UPSs at the bottom. That still the same, still being workhorses and working well. So yeah, one last look at the whole rack here. Try to get even more into the frame there. Cool. So on the inside, I've also done some work over the last year. So the PDUs are still the same. These are ones I got on Amazon. They're actually rated at 15 amps. They're great. If you haven't, I haven't actually really touched on them, but yeah, these are great. Look for my review on Amazon for the one that I praise. It's these ones. But I did get a huge monoprice order. I bought a whole bunch of these nice 3-foot, 2-foot, 3-foot cables. to replace all my cabling. They were just the right length for this rack. It was perfect. That cleaned up my power cabling quite a bit in here. And I also have a whole crap load of network cables that are going to be for the next phase here. And then I have my servers labeled down the side. And this stuff's still the same. I have my sitting way up here. Up at the top, I still have my tertiary backup hard drive, and I have my M system just kind of sitting there. And back of the routers and all of that. So yeah. My next plan is actually fairly extensive. It's part of the reason why I wanted to do this video now and, get the hardware changes done. Because my next plan is actually to rebuild the entire rack. This rack I built back, gosh, about 8 or 9 years ago now. So it served me very, very well for this time, especially during the time when it was turned 90 degrees. It was just the right size to fit in here. It was bigger than I had originally planned. When you assemble something in reality, it ends up being a lot bigger than your diagrams made it look. But I want to replace it. First reason being that there's enough space in here to get servers in and out, but it's the same problem I had when it was over here. It's just a little too tight to be comfortable doing it. Especially now that I have a lot more of these deeper servers. I just really wanted to have more space. So I'm redesigning the entire rack and rebuilding it from scratch to basically be about 6 to 12 inches shallower. So, I don't know, roughly about that much shallower should be ideal, but I could probably go even more, closer to a foot. And I'm just basically taking the opportunity to redo the whole thing. I kind of spec'd this in a weird way when I first built it 8 years ago, not really anticipating that I'd have this much stuff in it. And I was at the time planning for a lot more 2U and 4U servers. I didn't really imagine I'd end up running so many 1U servers. So I can basically build a brand new rack and kind of consolidate this a lot, make it a fair bit shorter, make it a fair bit, shallower, and get rid of a lot of the wasted space back in this area. Because, I don't need this much space in the back. So that I'm planning to do over the course of the summer. Just sort of get my saws out in the garage and kind of cut the boards down, do better joins than that shenanigans, and make a much nicer looking rack all around, and then probably move to it at some point, and also redo my power, because I don't like having the one power outlet there, which was also another change. I moved my power outlet over to here. It used to be behind the rack there, but now it's over here. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers all the interesting changes in here. Yeah, the next video you'll see will probably be with the new rack and with this room cleaned up a lot more. So should be exciting. And until then, take care.